utilizing it to train staff on human trafficking, right? For them to help them understand what it looks like from an awareness standpoint and then
Mm.
what to do if then found.
Welcome back to another installment of the Next Gen Case Study series. On this episode today, we have Joshua Hunt, who is the founder and chief visionary officer of Bolt Culture, a company dedicated to improving employee engagement and enhancing guest experiences through innovative solutions. With a focus on AI-driven efficiency, real-time feedback, and predictive analytics, Joshua has positioned Bolt Culture as a leader in creating sustainable and responsible business environments, and that's why we're excited to have him on the program today. Welcome to the show, Joshua.
Thank you. Thank you again. What a great intro, Devin. I appreciate, the opportunity to not only join you in this conversation, but to hopefully, shed some light on some of the, I guess, nuances within the space. And hopefully it can be helpful to your listeners.
Yeah, so let's dive into it. I'd love to get a Cole's Notes version of your history, who you are, where you came from, and how you ended up as the chief visionary officer for Bolt.
All right. How far should we go back? I mean, I when I give this story, uh, or when I kind of jump into this, I don't be like, oh, here's the high level. I usually like get deep. I'm a deep person, as you'll see as as the questions go on. But for me and how I got into employee engagement, I would honestly say it started when I was younger. Obviously, this is in hindsight, right? And by younger, I mean, let's say around like sixth, seventh grade. It's when I was able to kind of look back in hindsight and realize this is the problem I'm solving. As entrepreneurs, usually, we're committed and passionate about solving problems that we've personally faced. So for me,
Mm,
in school, engagement was a problem for me. It affected my performance. I was the urban kid with the same, American fiction story of the, uh, you know, grew up with four brothers in one room. And, in this type of environment, it did affect my schoolwork and it affected how I connected to others. In my environment, I wasn't able to express myself. In my environment, I also didn't feel like there was authenticity, right? So that led to essentially me being kicked out of school a few times. And, the very Salvation Army that, I would stand in line to get food for my family offered me and my brother a scholarship to a private school called Tyler Street, which was a great opportunity for me. It was like, okay, great, let's check this out. It basically took the place of me having to go to alternative school, which would have then took me on a different trajectory, right? So I got to go on a trajectory upward. However, while being there, I was still kind of facing those same issues that I was facing back, in my own, environment. And, I didn't feel like I could express myself. I didn't really feel like, there was authenticity in that school. Didn't really feel that relatability piece. And I had a really good friend there. His name was Trevor. And I just remember always going to his house and the first time I went there, I was just amazed. I'm like, you have your own room, Trevor? Like, dude, you have a pool in your backyard? Like those are things that are foreign to me, right? So being able to change my paradigm on like, hold on, this is what life is like. And like, I can attain this if I do what and if I'm what. And I'm saying what, and I'm putting my hands up for those who can't see. I'm I'm throwing the X up because it's like there's an X factor there. I just didn't know what it was in that time that may have led, his family to somewhat of success, right? So, fast forward, I had the opportunity to go to Duncanville out here in Dallas, Texas, where I played my first year of high school football, 11-man football. And it was a great opportunity at that unit or at that school because it was very inclusive. Coaches were great, team was great, and it was my first time. Like I said, all this is in hindsight. My first time I got to experience engagement and what
mm,
happened to my performance through this engagement, it really increased. Not only did I make all A's and B's, but I had over 30 or so plus offers to universities because of, not only my grades, but my athletic ability. So I chose to go to the number one business school at the time, which was Wake Forest, where, surprise, surprise, I faced that same problem I faced in private school, which it just wasn't that inclusive. It wasn't really that relatable for me. I wasn't able to be engaged. Professors really treated me like, hey, you're there because you're just an athlete, right? Going to a predominantly, you know, a Ivy League type school and predominantly white, that was just something that was assumed and felt, right? So with that being said, fast forward again, one of the things that I wanted to solve when I got out of college was that very thing, low employee engagement. Because the problem that I saw getting out of college was, hey, you have people who have been promised the same promise we all were promised when you go to college. You get the job that you want and dream of. Yippee. Except that's not how it actually plays out, right?
Right.
So I was faced with the same situation and problem amongst other colleagues, and I said, "Hey, I want to be a catalyst. I want to help, and I want to place these people, these unique individuals that I know, into these organizations by utilizing just my God-given innate ability, which I can look at and refer to as my own, proprietary insights, right? My own unique experiences are my own proprietary insights that I can then draw from and say, hey, if you're able to connect here and be engaged here, this is what will happen to your performance, and you will increase your performance. And oh, by the way, when your performance increases, it increases the performance of people around you,
It's
and
contagious.
it's contagious, right?
Right.
Exactly, and that's what culture ultimately is. It is a feeling, and that feeling can be contagious. However, starting in recruiting, I'm placing individuals. Let's say if I was like, "Hey, Devin, I want you to go here to this organization. I'll put you in there. You're doing great." You're like, "Hey, Josh, I love the pay. Pay's great. Location's great. The problem I have, Josh, the problem I have is my culture. It's toxic. My leadership team, they're pretty toxic. They're not listening to me. We don't feel connected to the mission." This is what I would hear, and I would say, "Dang, like that's sad to hear, Devin, but man, I need you to stay there for about another 90 days because that's how I get paid, right?" So then,
Right.
then I became a part of that problem. And then with the, 60,000, 30,000 lens, or being able to back up, I was able to see, you know, why I may have experienced certain things and why leaders may focus on certain metrics, right? And understanding that really kind of gave me a sense of empathy to know it's not, to know it's not to take things personal, right? So that helped, but I wanted to take another step back from the recruiting and was like, hey, this is external solution. Let's see if we can find an internal solution. So we took that step back, and our first, and we wanted to do like workshops internally for organizations and events for organizations because we thought that can help boost engagement, right? And we did so. And that first corporate partnership was actually with Microsoft, and it was a really, really great partnership with them. Had an amazing time. Ashley and they loved what we were doing. However, there was no way for us to quantify what we were doing, the impact that we were having on engagement. So we took another small step back and was like, hey, I used to recruit in tech. I think I have some really great tech developers still on tap. Let me reach out to one of the best that I had to recruit. His name was Roman. Great guy. He was actually from Ukraine, and he had his PhD in mathematics. And I was like, hey, we want to create logic behind engagement. And we want to quantify that in organizations so that we can not only present solutions based on these quantifications, but so that everyone has transparency to not only see how the culture feels, but to understand where their opportunities are, right? So we did that. We worked with some global HR leaders, some people that are 10 times smarter than me. And it was like, hey, let's put these metrics together, this algorithm together, and build this out. And we did that. And our first unique solution was the electric platform, which we introduced into hospitality in 2021. And from there, we just fell in love with hospitality. We wanted to make that our niche, our bread and butter. We can begin to just grow our roots in hospitality, where I think most businesses should grow their roots or at least come from the ethos of hospitality, and that's just serving, right? So when you have, a diverse amount of people serving, it leads to chaos sometimes, right? You have a diverse amount of people who are looking to attend to other needs, and we thought this was the best place to really test our solution. So that's where we landed, and fast forwarding to today, we're still in the hospitality space, still going strong, but we're shifting a little bit from engagement to performance focus. And we can get to that, later on in the pod. But I hope that was a good kind of encompassing way of how I got to where I am today. Was literally just solving that pain and hurt from that little kid who, ultimately, knew I was talented. I'm like, you would teachers, I used to hate when teachers be like, oh, you just have so much potential. Like, I don't know if you ever been told that, but I'm sure you probably have, right? Because usually entrepreneurs who kind of go out on their own and do their own thing has been told that at some point in their life. And for me, it was a little frustrating because I'm just like, I know I do, but I just can't grasp on, and I don't know what it is and what's holding me back. But turns out, like I said, it had to do a lot with my environment and me being actually fully engaged in the schoolwork. For employees, it's about them being fully engaged in their organization. So, something that I care about, pursued my PhD in organizational behavior, and wanting to keep pursuing that space because culture means a lot to me. People, is the number one currency, and want to utilize technology to essentially catalyst that, right? Like make some of these things robust for us, optimize how we operate within these spaces. There's too many tools nowadays for us to not operate and be optimal with communication and
Mm.
communicating to people and keeping people up to date and giving them the resources that they need in order to be successful at their job. There's definitely ways to do it. I understand it's very nuanced. People are all different. But through my experience, one thing I've learned is that people are predictable, more predictable than we may think, or more predictable than we would like to admit.
Right. There's this idea that we're all unique individuals, but in that uniqueness, we are one and the same. And I think that that's such a powerful way of looking at it, especially in the day and age now when we're all so present to all of these different like personality quizzes and types and archetypes and just the different avatars of who we are, what we could be. And I love that you were able to take something that was intangible, like productivity, and turn it into something that is measurable and improvable inside of the work that you do. I wonder, Joshua, if you could walk me through what that customer experience looks like from that point of them finding you or you finding them to how you onboard it. Because I get a sense that that experience is really important to you and it kind of defines the work that you're doing. Is that true?
Yes, yes, it's definitely important to me. Um, and I can walk you through some of the earlier stages when I was really hands-on.
Hmm.
To your point where you said that I can kind of get the feeling that this is important to you. And because it's so important to me, uh, you know, not to go off topic from the question, but because it's so important to me, I realized as a leader I had to just take a step back from working directly with clients because that did influence it's a difference between working on your business and in your business. Let's just say
Right.
that, right? And, when I was working in the business, this is where this onboarding, where I can kind of speak through what that onboarding looks like, where I think that there can be, some more value shared, considering what I do now is more like on the business and I kind of delegate other things. But working in the business, what we would do would be initially would essentially sit down with them from basically like a free consultation, if you will. And we really didn't have much of a sales flow or workflow, to be completely honest. We were a little unorthodox. And with us being in hospitality, it being a smaller community, it did allow for us to just kind of get, you know, word of mouth, right? To kind of get passed around like, hey, we're working with this company who's improving our culture. And hey, we're working with this company. You should meet Josh and Bolt. Like that was essentially how it kind of played out. And even from the very beginning, I kid you not, sitting in a hotel, where we got one of our first hospitality clients sitting in a hotel during COVID. And, I was coming just supporting that hotel. Let the CEO tell the story. She would say, I'm supporting the hotel by coming to their coffee shop often, grabbing coffee. Me at the time, I was really just trying to get out of my studio and so find somewhere else to work. But then at the same time, I was like, I do love hospitality. And I love like I love the scenes there, right? And the different types of people. So I did enjoy going to hotels to work, sitting in a hotel. chief operating officer comes by, introduce herself, asks what I do, told her what I did. She connected me to her HR, VP, and essentially from there, it took off. But what that first initial step looked like was a culture assessment, right? So when you're working with an organization, you don't want to just kind of shoot blind, right? Like you want to be able to understand and know where their opportunities are. And the best way to do that is to have an assessment, right? Like you can do qualitative and quantitative, right? So we did both, did some interviews, met with different leaders, because we were really passionate about solving this problem. And especially within this organization. So after this culture assessment is done, we take that feedback and we ask really unique questions like things that have heavy weights on them. Essentially, like a question like, would you refer this organization to one of your peers? A question like that is like twofold that people don't really understand how
Mm,
valuable a question like that is, right? Because that's basically saying, hey, I either yes, trust you enough to refer to somebody that I trust, or I do not trust you enough to refer you to somebody that I trust. And that is a really good, indicator, right? Amongst other questions, but that's a great indicator. And once you have a pulse of where that organization is, you can then present solutions that you can then present solutions that will, eradicate those problems that they're having. And we would then use AI, to produce solutions that are relevant to their opportunities. And they would also kind of, they would take the data that they have and then also restructure the the data that they've been given into an action plan, and then they would take that action plan and then disperse it to the organization. And we would kind of rinse and repeat that process. Throughout that process, there was also things that we did that was also contrarian during the time, and unheard of. Like, hey, you guys have ERG groups, employee resource groups for Black people, or for Mexicans, or for LGBTQ, or for you know Asians, right? That to me did not make sense, because I don't know if it's my competitiveness or if it was just I knew humans and people. We like you said it very elegantly, that it's just like, at the end of the day, we are people and we are predictable. And we are people, right? Like whenever I heard you say that, it's just like oneness comes to my mind. It's all about one. And the thing about DEI and ERGs, and I don't want to get you in trouble or put you in the hot seat. And this is why I do not talk. This is literally why I do not talk, because I can get myself in trouble, right?
it's a tough
But
subject.
it's a tough subject. But coming from, like, obviously a young African and Black American. And for me, it was tough to sit in these DEI roundtables when you're there with American Airlines and 90 and blah blah, like all these big organizations. And I would have the honor of to be in this group, but I would be contrarian at this roundtables. I would say like these solutions don't really make sense. And it came down to me where being in it and being right there with it was all about power. For it didn't matter if it was you know, the the lesbian who may be the chief VP of diversity, who's essentially wanting to keep that role because it gave her some sense of purpose or fulfillment in her life, or if it's that person who's just literally seeking power. I didn't see the benefits, and no one actually stopped to say, "Hey, are we actually solving anything, or are we just doing a lot to say that we are and to check
Mm,
a box off?" So what I did was usually diffuse those organizations and tried my best to convince the organization that I worked with to diffuse those programs and to create one program, which what we called the Culture Council. And we've seen engagement skyrocketed because we would get feedback and I would listen to the feedback. I don't know what happens when other organizations think that these things work, because I'm sure they would get similar feedback like, if I was a white American male, right, I would look at an organization that's doing something for another race and feel some type of way. Like I just would, right? Because I've been there. I've been on the opposite end of that spectrum and I know how that feels. So, I would convey that and say, well, there's a group of people that feels like this diversity council, as other organizations have coined them, they feel like they can't really opt in And in order to get true value, like you said, it has to be contagious and it has to be something that everybody can buy into, right? And that
Right.
wasn't something that happened, right? And I was just like, I
Wow.
can't, yeah, I couldn't really explain it in a way, and I still probably can't explain it in a way that's very succinct. So going back and listening to this, it probably doesn't make sense, but it makes sense in my mind. A good
Right.
way to another analogy that I could use to probably explain it well is that I've used before is, you know, on a, I played sports, right? So on a basketball team, we'll just use that instead of football. On a basketball team, if you have all five of your players are Steph Curry, you're going to lose to a team that is balanced. It doesn't
Right.
matter how good he is. If your team is not balanced, you're going to lose. But when you're picking, I don't know if you ever played pick the basketball or pick a pickleball or whatever, you're not like, hey, wait, I need two Asians, two black guys on my team, one white dude, and then we're gonna win. Like you do not do that, right? So it's like it's pretty funny to think about it that way, but it's literally what corporations were essentially demanding for people to do. And I do appreciate the legacy companies who, maybe did take the affirmative action serious and things like that. I appreciate that. And the it was the with the right intention. I get it. However, if we're talking about actually solving a problem, right, which is what I love to do, solving a problem and getting to a solution in a very effective way, that's not the most effective way to do it, right? It's going to be cognitively that you can do it. And you can pick talent based on their experiences and their skill set, right? I think that's important, more important than your ethnic, history or your experience. So,
You know what I admire about you is from your early experience, I think you learned, at least from what I've gathered, that the world is a very competitive space, especially being a man. And I don't want to make the conversation too polarizing, but I will say this. The competition is necessary for us to improve our skills. If you are good at something and I want to be as good at it as you are, then I want to practice and learn from you so that I am as good as you at it. The other thing that I recognize is that people value that which they have to work for versus something that's just given to them. And I imagine there's on both sides of the spectrum, and I'll just use your college experience as an example here. You're there because genuinely you have the merit to be there, but the perception is that you're there because of an arbitrary thing that you have no control over. And so from your
not on.
perspective, it's like I matter because I worked hard to be here, right? And to everybody else, it's like, oh, this person doesn't have the merit to be here because they're just here because of something else. And so you create a bad environment. And we can all just, if we look back in history,
Right.
remember a European leader who had good intentions, but
Hmm.
that was a disaster. And if you don't know who I'm talking about, then maybe there's a history lesson there to be had. But good intentions aren't enough. And I think what you're doing in terms of taking actual data and real information, real people's experiences, real people's feedback, and then adjusting the corporate landscape for the purposes of improving that culture, um, if for nothing else than just to strengthen the fabric of our collective society, right? Because
Right.
that's really the deep work that you're doing. But then
Sure.
beyond that, to improve the productivity of the company because everybody wants to work together to get better and improve and collaborate and right, all these other things. So I don't know if I'm off base here in saying this, but is that kind of the what drives the mission is to create is to kind of rebalance that initiative?
Yes, that is. And I think it's pretty profound that you were even able to kind of articulate that from this short interview. And I don't think that I've ever openly said that to an organization, but it's way deeper than the organization. But I also understand what you said, it being a very competitive place. Something about me is like, hey, I'm gonna go straight to the source, and I know that corporations is the ones who essentially establish that fabric. We live in America, which is an incorporation in itself, and we would
Right.
it would we would be ignorant to sit here and say that corporations don't run America, right? And don't run like the way in which we think and move and what we're taught, right? So
Mm.
I think that it was very, very important to start in corporate America with trying to reestablish this fabric and framework that allows us to communicate with each other and disagree with each other and be okay, right? And allows us to still perform in an environment that is engaging where we can still be okay if we disagree, right? And just it's
Right.
just this with this particular framework, it puts things into perspective, right? Because I mean, yeah, I'm a capitalist at heart, because I'm competitive, right? So
Mhm.
it puts things into perspective. I'm not a socialist when I talk about, hey, everyone should just hold each other arms and sing kumbaya. Like that's not what I'm aiming for. What we're aiming for is to just reestablish to really reestablish engagement, right? And when you're engaged, that means you're bought in and you treat people with respect when you're engaged. When you're engaged, ultimately, it's like you find relatability in other people, right?
Mm.
So that means just finding relatability. Let's just stop there for a second. Finding relatability in someone is just ultimately understanding their humanness. That's another way to look at relatability, right? I can't be so angry at you if I can't be so angry at you if I've actually taken the time to understand myself.
Wow.
And like you said, these things are only found. Understanding is only found in hindsight,
Mm.
right? So it's like you can't understand someone until you truly look back and understand yourself. So you won't have relatability. And it was just, and these things were proven to me over time. Like even during, I bring up COVID again, there was a white male who lashed out on me on LinkedIn for liking something. And I don't even know if he knew that where I stood politically, but he was mad, angry, DM'd me something that, I can't remember exactly how it went, but I basically just said, hey, brother, you're in Dallas. I'm in Dallas. Let's go grab some coffee. We went and grabbed coffee. Turns out there wasn't that much different about us. And I wanted him to see that, and also me to prove my own theory that there's
Mm.
relatability that you can find in everyone. And once we did that, we ended up being great friends. And it's that framework and maturity. I wouldn't even let me take the word maturity back. It's that framework and understanding that I think if conveyed the right way and articulated the right way or synthesized the right way, it can reframe a lot how a lot of people nowadays think. I kind of foreseen what happened with social media and the way things were moving. It was like that's a mass, you know, you got mass people sharing the same ideals. What do you think is going to happen? Like I can't get onto social media right now without seeing guys versus girls, or yeah, girls versus guys, and guys like girls are doing this, guys are doing this. Like you can't even get on the so everyone's singing the same song. It's pretty crazy. If you when you really look at it, but I think if you focus on kind of taking people out of that matrix, if you will,
Right.
for better lack of words, then you then help people understand, like, listen, I have my own issues. I'm taking accountability for my own actions. And we all know that taking accountability is like that's where the change happens. You
Yeah.
you can't blame others, right? You have to take accountability for your own actions. And that's, essentially one of the ways that I think we focus on to kind of revamp what I believe America was actually built on, right? It was built on that cognitive diversity. There were people who were like, hey, I don't want to sit under this regime anymore. Let's be free.
Mm.
Let's go create something that's free, for all. And I think that that's what we're trying to get back to, and what I believe, we should all kind of aim towards, and focusing on, like, how can we get back to that ethos of freedom and liberty and justice for all.
I love that. One of the things that I use myself to explain some of these really complicated ideas is the thousand floor building idea analogy. So everybody kind of starts on the ground floor. That's your understanding of the world, and you don't
Right.
really see much down there. But if you get to walking up them stairs, you can get to the second, third, fourth, fifth floor, right? And the more effort you put into understanding the world around you, the higher up you're going to climb. Now, some people have to climb that by the stairs the whole way, all the way up to the top, and they get to a certain point and it's exhausting and they give up and they're stuck at the 30th floor, and that's all they're ever going to see. Now, some
Hmm.
people make it up to, 100 or 200th floor, and, there's so much more that you can see from that perspective that you wouldn't have seen if you were on the 10th floor. And occasionally you have a guy like yourself who will come down from the 100th floor and talk to everybody that's on the 10th floor and go, "Hey, listen, I get it. I was on this floor once. And if you want to jump on the elevator with me, I can take you up to the 100th floor and show you what it might look like if you did XYZ." And so that you bring so much power to the world when you do work like that. And I just flowers while you're here, man. I just I hope that you recognize how important the work that you're doing is. And on that note, I wonder what's on the horizon for you. What's coming down the pipeline that you're excited about? What are you working towards?
Great question. And uh, one of the things that we're working on that I have a amazing call right after this actually to kind of talk through some of these things is spatial computing. And I haven't really told anyone really without outside of our network. So this is like just because I feel like it's a safe place. You've done a great job letting me talk about myself. You know, people love talking about themselves. So it's a you set the floor to get this information. Um so we're utilizing spatial computing for performance. And what do I mean by that is, we're partnering with an organization that has just launched some great VR, AR software, and wearable that employees will be able to utilize to not only understand how to communicate to their guests, right? It goes as far as how to make a bed, how to clean X, Y, and Z in the back of house this particular way, how to make drinks, 6 second pours, right? Like there's objects within the environments that you'll be able to utilize to create engagement, right? So this is performance focused, but guess how engaged you are when you're like this. So I still get to
Immersed in
win.
it?
Immersed in it, exactly. I still get to come with my engagement, I guess solution and framework utilizing our metrics within a performative environment, which I find very, very fascinating. And once I've experienced the immersive space, I was like, this is going to be the future. And I wanted to be a part of it. But one of the things that I'm really, really excited about and passionate about is utilizing it to train staff on human trafficking, right? For them to help them understand what it looks like from an awareness standpoint and then
Mm.
what to do if then found. So there's this small event called the FIFA World Cup that's coming to Dallas. Yeah, you laughing. It's going to be the biggest event that Texas has ever seen. That's what's
Yeah.
crazy. People are not aware of it, or aware of how big it's going to be. I
Yeah.
did have I was fortunate enough to be in some of those rooms when the developments of it was happening,
Mm.
and we were bidding for the World Cup. So, to have friends in my network that serve on boards of human trafficking and things like that. And they mentioned this to me at the time in 2021 or something like that. And I was like, wait, Texas is number two in human trafficking. And I'm like,
Ooh,
what?
that's
Yeah. I'm
crazy.
like, that's crazy. Yeah, number two. And then I was like, I took another step back to think about it and was like, wait, where do they get trafficked? I'm like, this is hotels. That's where I operate. I'm like, this is happening in my backyard without
Oh
really
man.
my own acknowledgement. And ever since then, I, not only joined a few different organizations to help fight this and bring different solutions and just help support and, not only just financially, but being there in the streets, actually supporting on the ground, is just something that I genuinely care about. So, I'm really looking forward to, partnering with, the right organizations on this, as well as the right talent to really see this to fruition. Because we're building this out as we speak. But I know it's going to be something that is going to be utilized and can be utilized. Like I said, for the right reasons, because you can utilize something as immersive as what we're working on for the wrong reasons. And I'm just flattered, honored, and blessed to be able to, kind of get ahead of it and use these tools for the right reasons. And that can create a huge impact. I mean, just to save one person's life, and to give them back their life is just, for me, it would be worth it. Right. So I know that, we're aiming for many more than that. But as the nine Super Bowls that come here in the next year and a half, I hope that we're in a position to be prepared to utilize tools and resources that we have to not only help people be engaged and know how to perform in a way that attracts guests and keeps guests from coming, but at the same time be ready to handle something as serious as human trafficking, because that is that's the Super Bowl for human trafficking. It's not just the World Cup for FIFA, but it's the World Cup for human trafficking. Things like that happen during those events. So, yeah, those are the projects that I'm working on that I'm really excited about.
Wow, man, that's incredible work. I hope that as that unfolds, we'll be able to get you back on the show so we can talk about some of the stuff that comes to fruition. Amazing work, man. Joshua, you've been very generous with your time, and for that, on behalf of anybody that's listening and watching, I'm very grateful. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and experience with us.
Yeah, likewise. I appreciate it. I hope that, if there's a young entrepreneur out there listening is inspired or encouraged, or for those who hate the things that I said, please reach out to me. I would love to chat with you and kind of see where, my opportunities are, and see if there's some mutual understanding that we can find.
If you had one piece of advice that you could offer somebody that's in that position, what would it be?
Could you on the position, the entrepreneur position?
Yeah, somebody who's in a similar role as you, who's kind of out here trying to do big things and facing challenges and not really knowing where to go or what to do about it. What would you say to somebody like that?
In a day and age where it's popular to identify with your insecurities and identify with the weakest version of yourself, I say overcome that and find a way to provide value. And what I mean by that is it's not about the value that you are, right? It's the value that you add. So
Mm,
just by being an African American, right? I'm not valuable until I'm actually adding that valuable or actually adding that value, right? It's not about the value that you are, but the value that you add. And you should always look to add value no matter where you are, no matter what room you're in, no matter what table you're at. Find a way to add value and you will be recognized for that value and you will get opportunities. It's that simple.
very sound advice. If somebody wanted to reach out to you to pick your brain further or perhaps work with you, how would one go about doing that?
Email is probably the best way, and that is at JHUNT at Bolt BOLT culture CULTURE.com. That would probably be the best way. Like I said, I've tried to be engaged on LinkedIn um, as much as I can, but I try to stay away from it as much as I can as well.
Fair
I,
enough.
you know what I mean? It's just I'm thrilled to stay away from LinkedIn. I'm happy. I am thrilled to say that I have been taking time away from LinkedIn. But
Good.
in all seriousness, reach out to me via email. Would love to chat and love to connect.
Beautiful. We'll link to all that in the show notes. If you want to get in touch with me and my team, anybody that's listening, you can visit nextgengrowth.com. Otherwise, that's it for this episode, and I will see you in the next.